The prime objective of our program is to diffuse the learning curve. In a traditional working setup, it will take you 16 to 17 years of working experience to be successful. We are trying to get that done in 16 months of a program. Our student body is very diverse. They are from 18 to 20 different countries participating globally. I think it's critical to have the student body that is diverse, that creates a network and opportunities for each other to connect within the respective countries and tap onto the resources needed to be successful in global supply chain management. We take a very holistic approach of delivering the education, understanding the need of the industry, and providing the tools and training that makes our students successful. We have designed and built our core curriculum with application of Lean Six Sigma, which allows students to be ready to implement the continuous improvement and create the savings for the company as soon as they graduate, so their return on investment is rapid. We also take our students in international trips. We believe having students see the Singapore, which has ability to move and monitor the supply chain infrastructure that is best in world, and it is imperative for students to understand how they can duplicate some of the learnings from Singapore experience to their company and their projects. Primary objective of the center is NEAR, Network Education and Advanced Research. We cannot educate and just prepare the students with their knowledge in the classroom. We are able to affiliate with industry and have direct access to resources, both from industry perspective as well as from advanced research that we do at the center. I think the reason supply chain is an exciting industry because we have become so global in the way we think, we do, we consume, we produce, and more than ever, through the history of human civilization, we have become so integrated and independent that future lifestyles and our consumption patterns will demand us to really look at the supply chain in different ways than we have done it for hundreds of years.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Wink Williams, and I'll be emceeing for the next 2 days. This is the 8th annual USC Global Supply Chain Excellence Summit, and if you've never attended one of these before, you're in for a real treat. We've got over 2,000 attendees, over 100 speakers, and your brains are going to get filled with facts, data, and lots to think about. So before we get started, we're doing this from California. California's got a lot of quirky rules surrounding COVID. So one of those is we need to take everybody's temperature, even for a virtual event. So if everybody could just put your foreheads up to the screen, let me get that. Oh, good. 97.3. We're good. You're running a little cold, so let's see if we can warm you up here. There's only really one way to get this started. And now, ladies and gentlemen, live from the 8th annual USC Global Supply Chain Excellence Summit in virtual California, let's get the summit started. All right, I think we're ready now. To start us off, I'd like to introduce the chairman and vice chair of the Center for Global Supply Chain Management, Jonathan Rosenthal and Carl Mount, to say a few words.
Thanks, Wink. So on behalf of the center, Wink just can't help himself, I think. What would our summit be without Wink's great booming voice? But on behalf of the center, welcome to the 8th annual Global Supply Chain Summit. I could not have imagined the events that have occurred since last summer when we gathered 750 of the world's top supply chain professionals on campus for our 7th annual summit. But this morning we have over 2,000 attendees and a lot to talk about. First, we all knew that our global supply chain was fragile, antiquated, but critically important to every facet of our lives. But when the tide goes out, we can see who's not wearing a bathing suit. And the pandemic has certainly exposed the world to some of our worst fears. I've been operating and investing in logistics companies for 35 years. But you know, this is the first time that I can recall nightly news anchors and pundits uttering the words supply chain. Second, our industry has attracted political and commercial attention that we just shouldn't squander. We should seize this opportunity to make things better. We should embrace transformative technology. We should adopt process improvement. We should implement data standards, and we should work together collaboratively to improve what it is we do. This window, this tipping point, it'll be fleeting, but the work we all must do will continue well beyond the headlines. Third, we must change our culture of legacy think to one of innovation. We must celebrate those trailblazers willing to risk it all to show us the way. Innovating is hard, it's painful, it's disruptive, and it can be scary. But why is it that just a few miles north of here in the Silicon Valley has so much come from so few? It's a difference in culture. It's the willingness to fail, and it's a world that rewards agents of change. In that regard, today, I am really pleased to announce that the Center has founded the Logistics Hall of Fame to honor those of you, past and present, who innovate for the greater good, who really move the needle without asking, what's in it for me? We see our industry for those of you who see our industry for what it is, a critical component of our global community. In the coming months, you'll hear more about the mission, the method, and the making of the Logistics Hall of Fame. Okay, I'd now like to introduce Nick Vyas, our fearless leader, without whom none of us would be here. Nick's been amazing. I've watched over the past years as Nick has built the center from its humble beginnings to one of the top programs in the world, teaching our future leaders. Nick's really that rare combination of industry expertise, academic rigor, and the DNA of an entrepreneur. I've been inspired by Nick, and I'm honored to call him a close friend and colleague. And I just now realize that Carl, my co-chair, who's a phenomenal guy from Starbucks, is waiting in the wings to say a few words. Carl, anything? Okay, why don't we move to Nick? You're on.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, good afternoon, in some places, good evening. Welcome to 8th Annual Global Supply Chain Summit. For those of you who have not had chance to be with us in a previous 7 summits prior to this one, I would like to welcome you. I would like to welcome you on a virtual format, a format that actually crosses the boundaries, continents, and allow us to connect over the next 2 days to discuss some of the amazing things that has happened in the world of supply chain while being in the COVID pandemic. Prior to doing and getting into the theme of the conference today, which is a Supply Chain Outlook 2020, Outlook 2025, let me just give a quick background of our program and centers, the state of the union of where supply chain ecosystem resides within the USCMarshall School of Business. The center has been amazingly agile and resilient prior to the COVID, but certainly during the COVID. When we had a chance to react to the COVID, the restrictions imposed upon us because of the social distancing and a large gathering. Marshall School of Business, my team, Dennis, Marvi, Ruth, Katie, Darcy, and the board members, with the support of my colleagues, responded to convert this into the virtual event. And I'm proud to say that with that, this 8th annual Global Supply Chain Summit has been started with the success. But the goal over here is truly to bring the global thought leaders together, academic institutions together, the students and the practitioners, policymakers, all of us to come together to talk about the importance of supply chain in humanity. And then when we talk about the supply chain, over the next 2 days, you'll hear, we're talking about the resiliencies, we're talking about the safety, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about the digital innovations, we're talking about the commercial real estate play. So we're not just talking about the supply chain from a one unique propositions, but rather holistic ecosystem in which the center really prides itself to create an amazing diversity of thoughts. Center also prides itself in research initiatives. We believe that that has certainly set us a different in terms of the center of excellence of making an impact that is meaningful to industry. Our core competency in Lean Six Sigma, driving the performance improvement, has certainly set a lot of training courses the center does to help industry transform and improve. These are the initiatives that I believe not only what happens in the classrooms, the students are engaged with the faculties, but outside the classroom, how they can participate and partake and apply what they're learning in the classroom into the real world applications. Not to mention, this year has been a very impactful year with all of the events through the news medias and conversation around the disruption supply chain that we'll talk over the next 2 days. Center was extremely busy participating in news releases and connecting with the media in providing the thought leadership. So while center and program both were founded together, I'm proud to say the focus on the program side, both online as well as on campus, we're so proud where we are stacked up being a young program in a space of supply chain. Online, we continue to retain our #1 spot. I'm very proud to claim that this is our 3rd year in a row, the US News and World Report, and on-campus students, we are certainly had a huge opportunity in that space as well. We're proud to say that 95% of our students coming out of our programs, less than 6 months, they're fully employed. And we have year after year, this will be our 5th year that we have 100% summer internship employment opportunity for our students. Again, the ranking doesn't really emphasize the overall ecosystem, but at least it's a part of it that we're very proud to manage the ranking and put USCMarshall School's global supply chain ecosystems in the top tier. I'm also proud to announce that this year's, in spite of the circumstances, we had almost 190% growth in our on-campus students and 21% on online. Cohort 8 is incredibly resilient. They are calling in, working virtually, participating in the class activities, working on program projects, and interacting with the students and enjoying the journey in spite of the circumstances dealt with the COVID. Without saying USC Trojan, we really pride ourselves being a global alumni network, but I'm truly proud to say our global supply chain alumni network, which now exceeds over 500, spans across 40 countries and relatively our 8th cohort old. So this gives you a perspective that how global supply chain management and when the global community comes together in terms of building this infrastructure. I'm also proud to give you a quick update on the demographics because it's important for us to understand that why Marshall School of Business, we take pride in diversity in all aspects, not only in terms of the demographics of domestic versus international students or the gender. We are proud to say this is our 4th year that we have exceeded over 50% of our student body being female. And this space traditionally have issues of gender parity. And we're very proud to say that young female generations leading away the next leadership frontier for decades to come, that will be part of our Marshall School of Business Global Supply Chain Management Program. 32% of our student body is the first generations and 14% underrepresented minorities. So all in all, we are doing well, but we continue to strive to do better in this space. So just a quick update, the theme for this summit, which is a Global Supply Chain Outlook 2025. And I will start out to Jonathan's point about, we have certainly seen the global supply chain go through its complete evolution in less than 9 months. If we think about the market sentiment before COVID-19, we were dealing with economic volatility. We were dealing with globalization and regionalization. There were constant battles from the policy side in terms of the tariffs and recalibration. Government and politics had become very active over the last 6 years, specifically over the last 3 to 4 years. The customer demand was changing. In the commodity cycles, we started to see this. This was all happening before COVID-19. If we now start to dive in and just take a glimpse of the 9 months, it truly started in December in Wuhan, China, which was late December, the first evidence of COVID impact. To, if we think about now, the disruption, the scale, the magnitude has ever been felt prior to this experience of COVID. We had a supply side disruption, we had a demand side disruption. To that matter, it was agnostic disruption that did not spare any network, any nodes across 188 countries. So the conversation, which was prior to COVID, which was already talking about the trade and policy implication, we started to talk about the short-term mitigation, start to deal with unemployment impact globally, start to focus into the public health and supply chain impact, because we found ourselves in a position of not being able to even protect those in the front line of our public healthcare systems, the shortage of PPEs, essential commodities. All of these things were completely shattered. But as we look and peek into the horizon post-COVID, or as we approach near the inflection point of COVID, there are large issues that we need to address. Human capital, reskills, retooling of education. A lot of the conversations I've spoken about it during the COVID is about decoupling versus deglobalization, although the sentiment from a political conversation and tone may lead us to believe that we're going to be deglobalized and we'll shelter ourselves into the boundaries of the regional communities. I'm a firm believer that the globalization will continue to strive. However, the decoupling of supply chain will certainly take in place. So if we now peek beyond just a short horizon and look at the post-COVID global supply chain network, what I am proposing here, that last 40 years, last 25 to 30 years in specific, the way we have handled the supply chain networks, doesn't matter your large multinational Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, or your SMEs, small to mid-sized enterprises thriving across the world, the supply chain networks post-COVID will have a different tone, different shapes, different sizes. And how do we prepare that? Right? So let's look at the part one of one of the very long blog that I wrote on the supply chain outlook. It is truly, we've seen a dramatic drop from China to US. It's evident, right? So while the export has fallen, but if you look at the data sets underneath it, the export via Vietnam, Taiwan, Mexico, and other countries has gone up. So what we're seeing is shifting of the trade volume, but the China is still playing a critical role. If you talk about the Vietnam, Taiwan, Mexico, the initial or intermediary supply chain and the WIP, the inventory, is still being supported through that. And this is a very interesting point that if you look at it, the Vietnam has certainly seen an amazing trend leading up to the first quarter of this year. Right, that tailwind was initially through the tariff discussions and the trade disputes between US and China in specific, although that actually also span across the Europe. But if you look at it, the decline in the second quarter, partly is to China's ability to come back and restart their network much rapidly, much efficiently, and much faster. So we're seeing the shifting of the volume back towards the China. So if we think about Vietnam, right, who has gone from, in 2000, 73 million tons of cargo a year to about 700 million tons in 2020. It's a tenfold growth in 10 years. That is going to be doubling over the next 10 years. Right? There's a tremendous activity in infrastructure growth that they're leading into building this decoupling infrastructure. So Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia. So if we start to think about the ASEAN countries and India subcontinent, results will really start to show which countries will benefit from this decoupling or the trade diversion, right? So we see initial top 10 countries: Vietnam, Chile, Malaysia, Argentina, Hong Kong, Mexico, Korea, Singapore, Brazil, and Canada. I still believe that Mexico has a huge role to play here, especially under the USMCA that was executed last year. And certainly Mexico, through their both hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure, if they continue to focus that and governance becomes a little bit more transparent, we'll see a greater benefit out of that. But if we think about the part two of this post-COVID world of ours, supply chain traditionally is an industry that is inefficient. We have tremendous friction across all the nodes globally. We still rely heavily on the paperwork, documents being pushed, too many regulations, and handoff throughout the network. Too many silos of data that don't communicate with each other, right? According to World Economic Forum, 20% of shipping goods cost is administrative expenses. If you think about inside the last mile delivery in the back end to the middle mile delivery, all the way to the front end of the supply chain, the sourcing side, this cost could go all the way up to 35 to 40%, right? Just think about 49 of 174 member state of the International Maritime Organization that have a functioning port community systems, only 49 out of 174. So we are dealing with a global economy that's driven off of a supply chain with an inefficient data structure, inefficient of a physical flow, and inefficient regulatory transparency. So what this leads us to is really the digitization of supply chain. The future of supply chain post-COVID, if we start to reshape it, if we start to decouple it, it will have to be pinned under the framework of digital supply chain. Use of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, IoTs, and integrating that with the immense transparency of data portability, integrations, and being able to create that end-to-end transparency that we're seeking. So once again, I think the name of the game post-COVID, we believe strongly that it is underpinned by highly robotic, highly system integrated, highly data-driven supply chains that will drive the future of supply chain 4.0. Just think about it. In 2014, the census, right? We were forecasting 0.9 billion installed unit in 2008. Just to realize in 2020, we have 26 billion installed unit. By 2025, just less than 5 years from now, we think that numbers could go up to about 200 billion. Just imagine the data points we'll be collecting. Data points will have an access to drive information, both in terms of the predictive and prescriptive capabilities. So what we see, the legacy retailers, legacy companies, their inability to use this vision and moving forward with this future of what we call this digital supply chain, they're drowning rapidly. And we really see the successful retailers, successful omni-channel players are differentiating themselves by taking advantage of this. So future of supply chain will have to be customer-centric network design that will be close to the customer, very integrated with the technology. However, will have not only the cost as the prime objective of optimization, but the service, sustainability, environment, and the human resources, and the impact they make in their community. So we will see a tremendous regional nodes integrated globally to make sure that civilization, the human civilizations, never catches itself again in end-to-end disruptions like we did in COVID. So we do see that the disruption is across the world, but adoption is yet to scale up. There's a tremendous confusion. Where do I start? How do I start? And how do I go about it? So we must ask these questions. How do we realign our supply chains post-COVID? How do we use and understand AI, ML, deep analytics, robotic process automation, blockchain, marketplaces, and its capability? How do you integrate those? What are the steps that organizations must take to communicate emerging tech and its implication? We have to prioritize that not all of those opportunities can be levered at the same time. We have to make sure that this capabilities becomes end-to-end. How do we plan to integrate this across the platform? But the bigger question is, how do we plan to educate, train, and prepare our executives and employees to adopt these capabilities? We're proud at the USCMarshall School of Business that we are in position to lead in this frontier, to train the future generations leaders with these capabilities. We created the elective class 2 years ago in emerging technologies and supply chains. We are talking about the blockchain. We're leading in that front. We're talking about AI, ML, IoT integrations, working with our engineering school. This is human capital will become the biggest assets that we're gonna have to pay attention to it and focus on it. So last reflection, I know many times and often we find ourselves, personally and professionally, the COVID and its implication of our civilizations. We were social beings. We've been clipped away from our flying around the world. We've been clipped away from socializing, having dinners and lunches with the families and friends. We've been taken away, going to places. But John F. Kennedy had articulated this beautifully. He says, when written in Chinese, the word crisis composed of two characters. The first one represents the danger, and then this other represents opportunity. I feel we have a huge opportunity to not revert back to the status quo, but utilize this opportunity as a catalyst to drive the supply chain of the future, underpinned by digital transformations, underpinned by not only the cost, but sustainability, resiliency, agility, and beyond that, integrating the human capital, making sure that we don't leave a generation behind, we don't leave anybody in our society behind, and teaching them the tools that they can participate in the future of our global supply chain management.